We've got 2 days to go until Election Day, and the latest post-ABC tracking poll shows this. Hillary Clinton with a 5-point lead among likely voters with 48% support. Donald Trump has 43% support. Gary Johnson with 4%, and Jill Stein now with 2%. Joining us right now is Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party presidential candidate. Dr. Stein, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you, Maria.
First, your reaction to this latest poll.
Well, you know, there's polls and there's polls. Most of them actually undercount our voters, which are millennials, independents, people of color, and immigrants. They are systematically undercounted, so odds are we're much higher. In fact, recent polls have shown us at 4 and 5%. And let me just say that 5% is a critical threshold for America, because it means then we will have an independent major party that the American people are actually clamoring for. As you know, most Americans actually find this election repulsive, and that's the word that was used in the latest polling in the New York Times. That's 80% who find this a repulsive election with the most disliked and untrusted candidates. And the American people have been systematically denied the knowledge that there is another choice which is not bought and paid for by Wall Street, by the war profiteers, by the fossil fuel giants. That's the kind of independence the American people are really hungry for, especially after this election.
You make a good point, but let's be realistic. You're not going to be the next president of the United States based on these numbers. And so my question to you is, how do you continue your messaging? What are you going to do to keep this conversation that you have brought to the table alive?
Thank you, Maria. You know, and that's exactly the point that I want to drive home, which is that if we hit 5%, that is a breakthrough, because at 5% we become a nationally recognized party. We immediately have $10 million out of the starting gate in the next presidential election, and it means we have automatic ballot access on most states. So that means that Americans actually are guaranteed that you have a choice. So make your vote count. You know, don't throw your vote away on more of a political system that has thrown you under the bus. You can actually invest your vote in this race in a real movement for change, and that is transformative. Coming out of this race, we're going to be focusing on two things in particular that have really bothered the American people. Number one is that Americans deserve to know who they can vote for. We need a debate commission that's not controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. So we're going to be creating a campaign to throw out this biased two-party commission on presidential debates that silences political opposition at a time that the American people are hungering for it. We're going to create a real People's Commission for the presidential debate.
Well, you say a lot of the polls undercount millennials and different groups, but also, you know, the support for independent candidates, and I'm independent politically myself, but the support for independent candidates tends to shrink closer and closer to the election. There is still this idea that you're wasting your vote by voting for another party. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's very prevalent.
Well, and let me say there is specifically an answer. It's called ranked choice voting. And what it does is it lets you go into the voting booth and rank your choices. So you can vote for an independent or a third-party candidate, knowing that if that candidate loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. So then there's no fear voting. There's no voting based on some calculation that you don't want your vote thrown away. This guarantees that you can bring your values into our vote, which is what Americans are desperate for. Because just, you know, an election that's dictated by who do you hate the most and who do you fear the most, that's not a democracy. Democracy needs a moral compass. It needs our values. We've got to be able to bring our values to the voting system. And the Democrats have refused to pass this voting reform. My campaign has filed this bill when I ran for governor in Massachusetts. They refuse to let it out of committee because it calls their bluff. They don't want to have to compete with an independent political party. Same is true for Republicans. So this is all for voters. And I encourage people, go to Jill2016.com and become a part of this real movement for the change that we need, and invest your vote in that movement by voting green in 2016. You can make all the difference.
Dr. Stein, I've seen you speak before in an interview where you say that Mr. Trump is a safer choice for the world. Could you elaborate on that a little?
Okay, so let me just be clear. Hillary Clinton is a proven warmonger. We know that. Donald Trump, you know, is a loose cannon, and I don't want to say that Trump is safe. But on the other hand, Hillary has a catastrophic record and is calling for a no-fly zone in Syria. What most people don't understand is that a no-fly zone in Syria amounts to a declaration of war with Russia at a time that we have 2,000 nuclear weapons on hair-trigger alert. This is unbelievably dangerous. The former leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, just said 2 weeks ago that this is the most dangerous moment in human history for the development of nuclear war.
Right.
So, you know, I will not sleep well if Donald Trump is in the White House, but we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that all is well if Hillary Clinton is in the White House.
So will you...
I will sleep best, knowing that we have a strong movement for a really rational foreign policy based on international law and human rights, not on brute military force.
If it's clear you're not going to win, will you tell your supporters to vote Trump?
No, absolutely, because Trump is a total wild card. We have to build a movement. You know, under Richard Nixon, who was one of the most, repressive presidents ever, we accomplished all kinds of things. We brought the troops home from Vietnam. We moved forward women's right to choose. We actually got that from a very conservative Supreme Court.
Right.
We got the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and worker protection. We did that because we were an active and very assertive political movement at the time. That's what we need. That's what you get by voting green in this election. We actually build a social movement to challenge the stranglehold on our democracy that the Democratic and Republican parties have.
All right, Dr. Stein, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.